All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Tonight's webinar is going to be about what you should look for in a college. So I'm going to talk about some resources and some suggestions for helping you develop your college list for schools that you should apply to. And then hopefully that can also help you with deciding ultimately what school you want to go to as well. So just to kind of introduce myself, my name is Allison. I'm an undergraduate admission counselor here at USciences. I've kind of had experience working with students on both sides of the desk. So before I was an admissions counselor here, I did work at a bunch of different high schools in Philadelphia, helping students identify what schools to apply to. So hopefully I'll be able to help you guys out a little bit tonight. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was creating a college list. So I think it's really kind of a good idea to shoot for applying for maybe around 4 to 6 schools, definitely no more than 10. I think just narrowing down the list of schools that you want to apply to can really help you with your workload in terms of applying to schools. And then it can also really help you ultimately make an easier college decision. Of course, we hope that USciences is at the top of the list for you. And another suggestion I have is just making a list of maybe 5 to 10 things that are really important to you about a school. So maybe some deal breakers or some things that are really important to you. I think creating that list can really help you decide what schools that you're interested in. Another question that you might want to ask is, how far away do you want to go to school? I know some people want to go really far away to college. Some people want to go a little far, but not too far. And some people want to go to school close to home so they can commute. So I think that's a really great question to ask yourself. Another thing to think about is, what type of setting are you looking for when you go to school? So by that, I mean, are you interested in going to school in a city like Philadelphia, where there's a lot of great opportunities for things like internships and shadowing and fun things to do on the weekend? Maybe you're interested in more of a suburban or a rural setting or somewhere in between. So that's another great thing to think about. Another thing is, what size school would be the best for you? So when I was looking at schools to apply to, I definitely knew that I wanted to attend a small school. Here at USciences, we are a smaller school. You really get those small class sizes, more individualized attention, get to know your professors, or maybe you might be interested in some medium or large size schools as well. Of course, when you're thinking of what school you want to apply to, you also want to think about what you want to study. So for example, there are some schools that have certain programs that have benefits to them. There are certain schools that have really strong areas in certain programs. So of course, the ultimate goal of going to school is to get a degree and to learn. So you definitely want to think about the schools that offer programs that you are interested in. Another one would be, what type of campus environment and activities are important to you? So maybe you're interested in playing a sport in college. Maybe you are interested in different religious or cultural groups, honor societies, things like that. So definitely checking out schools' websites and seeing what they have to offer. And then lastly, I think one of the most important things when you're thinking of what school to apply to and ultimately what school to attend is, can you see yourself going there? So if you apply to a school and you're accepted and you're super excited, can you really see yourself as a student on campus? So those are just kind of all the tips I have for when you're thinking about what schools that you want to apply to, and hopefully help you decide where you want to go. So as I mentioned before, academics is one of the most, if not the most important thing of attending a school. So of course you want to apply to schools that offer programs that you're interested in. So for example, you might be interested in a program that may only be offered at a handful of schools. Or maybe you're interested in a professional program. So here at USciences, we offer a lot of great accelerated direct entry programs with pharmacy, occupational therapy, and physical therapy. So maybe you kind of know what you want to study before you apply. You can kind of focus and look for programs that offer accelerated degrees. I know a lot of you that have signed up for this webinar are actually interested in pre-health and pre-med, which is wonderful. So I think something to think about is, do schools have specializations that would help me, with pre-med? Here at USciences, we have a pre-med specialization. We also have pre-dental, pre-optometry, and pre-veterinary. And you could add any of those specializations to any of your programs. So you'll be having all of those prereq courses already in your curriculum. So I think it's really great if you are interested in pre-med or pre-health, kind of thinking about the different pre-med options that schools have to offer. And kind of along those lines, you know, do schools have any sort of partnerships with graduate schools? So as I said, for those of you interested in pre-med or pre-health, we do have a lot of great partnerships with some medical schools, DO schools, things like that, dental schools. So that's a really great opportunity that we have that we can offer for our students. And then another thing to think about is, you know, are there different advising and resources available for me? So kind of going along the same lines of pre-health, we do have here at USciences, 2 full-time pre-health advisors. So I think that's kind of a great thing to look for when you're looking for a school, just kind of seeing what advising and resources are available to you. If you are interested in pre-med or any sort of pre-health field, we are going to be having a webinar, I believe on October 22nd, that will have our 2 pre-health advisors. So I definitely recommend that you guys check that out if you are interested in pre-med or pre-health. They do a lot of great things like helping you find internships and shadowing. They actually help our students do things like mock interviews. So you'll actually can practice what it would be like to answer questions for a medical school interview. They do a lot of MCAT prep. So it's really kind of nice to see if schools are offering any resources for the specific career that you're interested in. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was something called match and fit. So some of you guys may have heard of this before. So I think this is a really important thing to consider when you're thinking of the schools that you want to apply to. So if a school matches you, basically what that means is that you have a similar academic history as the students that attend that school. So what that means is, you know, your grades, your GPA, maybe your standardized test scores are similar to students that attend that school. It is important to note that a lot of schools, including USciences, are going to be test optional for fall 2021. So the test scores may be a little bit different, but it's definitely good to look for schools that match you on an academic level. And of course, that could also mean the majors and programs that you're interested in as well. And then fit basically means everything else outside of academics. So does the school fit you socially, physically, financially? So again, this could be something like the size of the school. It can also mean the setting. Maybe you're interested in more of a city or maybe more outside of a city. I will give a little shout out to USciences. I think we're kind of great at being kind of in between an urban and suburban type school. The immediate surrounding area to campus, there's a lot of parks and trees, and it is a little bit more of a residential area of a city. But then we're only about like a 10-minute trolley ride to Center City, Philadelphia. So kind of the best of both worlds there. You also want to think about the activities that are available on campus. So as I said, any sort of clubs, professional organizations, sports, things like that. It can also mean things like research or professional opportunities. So I talked a little bit about that, but you really want to see, you know, am I going to be able to add things to my resume that will help me after I graduate? Here at USciences, our students are able to do research as early as their second semester freshman year, which is great. Of course, you also want to think about the things that you can do on or off campus. So, you know, are there fun things to do on the weekend? Are there restaurants, movie theaters, things like that? And then, of course, you also want to think about the cost of the school. So you want to think, is this school going to be a financial best option for myself and my family? So I also want to spend a little bit of time kind of going through each major type of school. So it's kind of divided into like 4 different types. So I'm just going to kind of briefly go over each one. Obviously, some schools are kind of overlaps for a bunch of different categories. But the first major type of school, when you're thinking of what school might be best for you, is a research school. So these are typically larger in size, you know, physically and also with student population. You often will apply to a specific school or program at that university. So for example, you would apply to the School of Health Sciences instead of applying to just the whole university. A lot of times professors are active researchers in their field. They typically have those larger kind of lecture style classes, and they typically offer both undergraduate and graduate programs. There's also liberal art colleges. So these schools are usually a little bit smaller in size. You typically have smaller classes that are emphasized on discussion and more seminar-based learning. It typically is only for undergraduate students, so they typically only offer bachelor degrees. There is a focus on kind of being a well-rounded student and taking classes outside of your program. And a lot of times you really do get to know your professors. Again, I'm going to give a little plug to USciences. I think we are actually kind of a great blend between a research school and a liberal arts school. You know, we are smaller in size. We offer those smaller classes. You do really get to know your professors. You can also take classes outside of your program if you're interested in the humanities and things like that. But at the same time, we definitely do have a huge emphasis on research. I actually think it's a little bit easier to do research at USciences than it would be at a larger research school, just because we are smaller. And you know, typically at larger schools, you may have to wait to be an upperclassman or maybe even be a top candidate in your program. So that's just my little shout out to USciences. Of course, there are a couple other types of schools as well. So there's the community college, which I'm sure we've all are familiar with. So these typically offer those 2-year associate degrees that can prepare you to transfer to a 4-year school. The certificates there are mostly focused on a little bit more career-oriented programs. Typically, students do not live on campus and they commute, and it is a relatively less expensive option for students. So I do think a great pathway for some students may be attending community college for 2 years, saving some money, and then transferring to a 4-year school. Here at USciences and at a lot of other schools, we have some great transfer counselors that can actually help you see what credits would transfer over. And then there's also trade schools. So those are those types of schools that are more focused on industry and career. So for example, things like culinary arts, dental hygiene, carpentry, and they typically offer certificates and associate degrees as well. So I think it is kind of good to just kind of go over the different types of schools that are available to you. I also wanted to talk a little bit about something called safety, match, and reach schools. So this kind of idea is applying to different types of schools based on your likelihood to maybe get in or the selectivity of the school. So a safety school is a school that you may be more likely to get into based on the academic credentials of the students that attend that school. So maybe your academic credentials, you know, your grades, maybe your test scores are a little bit higher than the students that go there. So you may be a little bit more likely to get in. I think it's good to apply to just, you know, 1 or 2 of these schools to have your bases covered. You definitely really want to focus on match schools. So those are the schools where you are a competitive applicant for that school. So your GPA, your grades, things like that typically match the academic credentials of the students that go there. And then of course there are reach schools. So you may be a little bit less likely to get into the school based on the selectivity. Maybe their grades and test scores and things like that are a little bit higher than yours. I always think it's good to still apply to reach schools. You never know what could happen. But overall, I think you really want to focus on those match schools, apply to 1 or 2 safety schools, and then you always want to try with the reach schools as well. I also wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about some resources that you can use to help find schools to apply to, kind of find out some more fun information and some facts, and also use to compare schools. So the first resource that I have is Big Future. Big Future is actually affiliated with the College Board, which is the company that makes the SAT. I use this with just about every single student that I worked with when I worked at high schools. I think it's a really great comprehensive resource for students to use. I will say if your school has Naviance, I know a lot of schools offer Naviance. Big Future is kind of similar to Naviance in a way. So a lot of the things I'm going to talk about in terms of searching and comparing, you can also use Naviance if your school offers that. But one of the great things that you can do on Big Future is search for schools based on multiple criteria at once. And then it will kind of match you to a list of schools that meet all the criteria that are important to you. So you can search for things like test scores, the acceptance rate, the years of the school. You can look for public or private schools, different size, like I mentioned. You can also search for schools based on state or region. So for example, you can search for schools only in the Mid-Atlantic region if you're interested in that. You can also even do a mile radius from your zip code, which I think is pretty cool. Of course, you can also search for things like majors, academic programs, activities, diversity. So basically you can search for just about anything that would be important to you, and it will give you a list of all the schools that match those criteria. Another cool thing you can do on Big Future is actually see that distribution of GPAs and test scores for different schools, as well as the course requirements. So for example, I used an example here. This was USciences. I think this information was from a couple years ago, so it might not be super up to date, but you can kind of see the middle 50% range of different test scores for students, just to kind of see on average what students are receiving on their test scores. Of course, averages always mean that 50% of students scored below and 50% of students scored above. You can also see cool things like the distribution of GPAs for incoming freshmen. So for example, on this chart, over half of the students did have over a 3.75 GPA. So it is important to note that typically these do not mean that these are admission requirements for schools, but it kind of gives you an idea of the type of student that would attend there. You can also see course requirements for admission to schools. So for example, some schools might require certain years of different courses. Like here at USciences, we have, we require Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry for math. And we also require 3 years of science with the lab for our professional programs and 2 years of science with the lab for our bachelor degree programs. So all of that sort of information that you would need to make sure that you are following those course requirements will be on there for you. Another really cool thing you can do on Big Future is actually compare schools. So for this example, I compared USciences to Drexel, our next door neighbor here. So you can kind of compare, I think up to 3 schools side by side. And so you can kind of see different things like the location, the campus life, and you can also kind of go more in depth with different factors that are important to you. But I think it really is helpful to kind of be able to compare by schools visually side by side. Another resource that I wanted to mention is College Scorecard. So College Scorecard is actually a US Department of Education website. So it's very official, very up to date. You can do similar things like you can on Big Future. So you can search for schools based on some different criteria. But I think one of the best things is that you can actually find out a bunch of really cool facts about schools on here. So if you're a nerd like me and you like learning different statistics, this is a great website for you. You can see things like retention rate and graduation rate. So for those that don't know, retention rate refers to the percent of students that return back for a second year. And graduation rate usually means the percent of students that graduate in 6 years. So obviously you want to be, applying and attending schools that have good retention rates. People want to come back to the school. High graduation rates usually mean that the schools provide great resources for their students to help them. So those are some cool things to look at. You can also see things like an average salary of graduates. And I did actually recently go on here, and it's kind of cool. They will actually give you the average salary based on different majors at schools, which is interesting. You can also see popular programs for students. And you can also see an estimate of the net price for a school based on your family's income range. So basically what that means is that based on your family's income, you could see an estimated amount of financial aid that you might receive subtracted from the school's tuition. So it's kind of like a quick way to see how much a school might end up costing you. So of course, once you have your list of schools that you want to apply to, visiting schools is a great idea. Obviously, due to COVID, many of these visits have been switched to virtual. Here at USciences, we do have a pretty great virtual tour on our website of our entire campus. And we also have a virtual tour of our new residence hall, the Living and Learning Commons for our first year students. And we are having a few on-campus events too. So if you are interested in a daily tour or an open house, we do have those available on our website. So I think it's really great to just kind of go to different schools' pages, see what they're doing in COVID. I do think one of the benefits to actually having mostly, virtual events now is that you may be able to, visit way more schools than you may have been able to physically otherwise. So this is a really great opportunity to just look at schools, of different sizes, maybe different settings, maybe look at a public school versus a private school. I think, visiting or virtually visiting a school can really kind of give you the inside scoop on a school. And then lastly, I think it's really important to show interest to the schools that you want to apply to and want to attend. I think it's great to get to know your admission counselor at the school you're interested in, and definitely ask questions. So I've kind of compiled a list of questions that I think are really great for students to ask admissions counselors or representatives from universities. So I'm just kind of gonna go through the list of questions that I made. My first one is, do you offer hands-on learning or experiential opportunities? So for example, here at USciences, we have a huge emphasis on hands-on learning. So I think that's a really great question to ask. You can also ask, again, for my pre-health or pre-med students attending, what resources does the school have for the pre-health students? You know, what is the school doing to help their students be competitive applicants for medical school, for graduate school, things like that? Another great question is, can students participate in research, and how early are they able to participate in research? Again, participating in research is such a great thing to put on your resume, whether you want to enter graduate school or the workforce. So that's a really great question to ask. Another one would be, what is your student to faculty ratio? So that basically means for each faculty member, how many students are there? Here at USciences, we offer a 7-to-1 student to faculty ratio. So that can really give you an idea of, you know, the class sizes that you might be exposed to and things like that. Another great question is, what advising do you offer for your students? You know, here at USciences, we also have some great academic advisors. So it's really kind of nice to see if there's any other sort of resources that schools have for their students. Another really fun question would be, what are some successful alumni stories? Here at USciences, we love to say our alumni are proven everywhere they go. We've had some alum do things like develop the higher root beer extract, which is pretty cool, to even alumni that have founded the top pharmaceutical firms in the country. So I think that's kind of like an interesting way to see, find out a little bit more about a school. Another really great question would be to ask about financial aid and scholarships. I think asking about, you know, if there are scholarships that you can apply for, or if there are scholarships that you are automatically considered for. Here at USciences, we, for example, automatically consider all of our applicants for academic scholarships, and there's no separate application for that. So I think kind of finding out if a school offers academic or merit awards or any other awards, you know, asking, do I have to apply for these separately? Am I automatically considered? That can really kind of help you think about, you know, the cost of college. And then a few more questions that I have too. I think another great question would be, you know, asking about employment after graduation. How are the recent graduates of the school doing? Also, what is the average salary after graduation? A couple years ago, we had a stat that our median salary was over $91,000. So that's a really great question to ask. You can also even ask things about, like, what exciting things does the university have planned? I think, you know, thinking into the future and thinking what opportunities may be available for you while you're a student there that may not be available just yet would be a really great question to ask. And then also just seeing if you can talk to a current student at the school. You know, ultimately you are going to be in that student's shoes. So usually current students can really give you the inside scoop of what it's actually like to be a student in terms of academics and student life and things like that. So that's just kind of a list that I created for you guys of questions that you can ask admissions counselors, or when you visit schools virtually or in person. So that's basically everything that I had. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys when thinking about what you should look for in a college. I'm definitely going to be available if you have any questions about anything that I spoke about, or the resources that I shared, or about USciences or our application process or anything like that. You are definitely welcome to ask me questions, and really thank you guys for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Allison. And for all of our participants in the room, if you have questions, you're welcome to type them into the Q&A feature, or you can also, you can use the Q&A feature or the chat feature, and we will answer those for you. If you submitted your application already, you can let us know in the chat feature, the Q&A. We would love to know that if you already submitted your application. And I know that we had put it in the chat, but just wanted to reiterate that, you know, when Allison was talking about the SAT scores and ACT scores throughout the presentation, that just a reminder that USciences is test optional this year. So if you're a senior and you're applying for 2021, we will not require the SAT or the ACT.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a couple of links in the chat here. So Allison talked a little bit about visiting and visit opportunities. So there's plenty of opportunities to visit USciences, but also other universities that you're considering. But we'd love to see you on our campus and in some of our future webinars and online events. So their visit link is in our chat. So it's usciences.edu/visit, and you can check out all of our on-campus and virtual visit opportunities. Oh, looks like we have a question. Okay, so I was wondering how many students are in the college right now, and what is the ratio of different ethnicities? So that's a great question, and yeah, I'm happy to take this question. So, so in terms of our current enrollment at USciences, we have just under about 2,400 students on campus. Majority of the students would be considered traditional undergraduate students, whether they're in our bachelor's degree programs or our professional programs. In terms of ethnicity on campus and diversity, we are a very ethnically and racially diverse university. In terms of the different ratios of ethnicities, for our last incoming class, we were about 41% Caucasian, right around 30% of Asian students, and then about 10% African American and about 7% Hispanic students. If you have any additional questions, follow up, feel free to ask them. Yeah, and as I mentioned, we are a very ethnically and racially diverse institution, and increasingly so over the past couple of years, just from the last incoming class to this current incoming class for 2020, we saw some significant increases in some of our underrepresented populations on campus. So we were very excited to be able to kind of welcome a more diverse group of students to our institution this year. Yeah, great question. If you have any additional questions, you are welcome to use the Q&A feature. We can answer those for you. Okay, we had a question about the pharmacy program acceptance rate. This past year, the acceptance rate for the pharmacy program was right around 65%, just under 65%. I do want to just say though that we look at applications in a holistic review. So we look at everything that you're submitting as part of your application process. We're going to be looking at your transcript. We're going to be looking at your common application with your activities list. If you're a resume, if you submit a resume, we'll be looking at the honors that you were awarded. We'll also be looking at your essay as well. So everything that you submit with your common application will be part of the review process under that holistic review. We're going to be looking at the letters of recommendation that you submit, and we're really looking for students who are not only challenging themselves in the classroom and earning strong grades, especially in math and science classes, but who are also well-rounded and are involved in extracurricular activities or have additional responsibilities at home or have a part-time job or leadership opportunities. So we really do want to see a well-rounded student.
And if you are interested in general like USciences application process, we are going to have a webinar coming up later this month, I think on the 14th, all about USciences and our application process. So if you have any, kind of want to know more information about that or have any questions specific to that, you can also attend that as well. And we have some other great ones about pre-health and science majors and things like that. We have one about financial aid. So we definitely encourage you guys to attend those webinars as well.
Definitely. So if there are any additional questions, you're welcome to ask those. Our colleague Gary has put the admission office contact information in the chat, so you're welcome to take a look at that and send us an email if you have any questions after this session. But we definitely hope to see all of you on campus or online and for future webinars. And we look forward to working with all of you. Okay, and then we have another question here. Over winter break, will students be able to have a tour? So I'll just take that question. So we offer plentiful opportunities for daily tours, really Monday through Friday, pretty much every day throughout the year, except for certain holidays. And also we do close our institution over the winter holiday, just basically from about December 25th to January 1st. So that's the only time we're really closed. Save for some of the other, national and nationally recognized holidays. Otherwise, we are pretty much open for the rest of the year throughout the week, Monday through Friday. So we definitely encourage you to visit. And a lot of times, for example, on Columbus Day, a lot of schools have off of school. We are open on Columbus Day. So if you have a day off from school and you would like to come and take a visit to campus, chances are we will probably be open for the most part, unless it's a national holiday. That's, things like New Year's, Christmas, Easter, that's on a Sunday, but 4th of July, Memorial Day. But otherwise, we'll pretty much be open. So yeah, if you want to come to Columbus Day, I know there's some number of other holidays throughout the fall and even into the winter, into the January and February months that you might have off from school. So we encourage you to come and visit our campus. Okay, and I think we are going to go ahead and end our session here. So thank you so much for attending today. And Allison, wonderful job. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you. And thank you guys all for joining today. If you do have any follow-up questions, you're definitely welcome to email our main admissions email that we have in the chat as well.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone.